All right, class, settle in, settle in. Welcome to our study session. Your semantics exam is coming up, so today we are going to break down one of the biggest questions in the field. How does meaning actually work? It seems so simple on the surface, doesn't it? But trust me, it's a fascinating puzzle, and getting it right is crucial. So let's dive in. Okay, here's our game plans for today. This is basically the outline of what you'll need to know for the test. We're going to start by knocking down a really common but wrong idea about words. Then we'll look at how meaning isn't stable, it actually shifts over time. After that, we'll get to the absolute core of it, the difference between sense and reference. Seriously, star that in your notes. We'll see how it works in practice with something called lexical chains, and finally, we'll talk about why sentences, not words, might be the real stars of the show. Let's get to it. All right, first up, let's tackle the theory of meaning that probably feels the most natural to you. It's the common sense view, the one you'd come up with if you were just thinking about it off the top of your head. But, as we're about to see, this idea is a lot shakier than it looks. This is called the naming theory, and it's ancient. We're talking Plato's Cratylus. The idea is super simple. A word is just a name for a thing out there in the world. The word cup is a label for, well, a cup. Tree is a label for a tree. You get the idea. Language is basically just a giant list of tags we stick on everything. Seems to make sense, right? Well, is it really that simple? As linguists, our job is to poke and prod at these ideas. So let's put this one to the test. Let's see what happens when we apply just a little bit of pressure. And it falls apart almost immediately. The naming theory works okay for simple nouns like table. But what thing are you pointing to when you say the word run or remember? Can you point to an object in the room and say, that's difficult? And what about all those little grammatical words like under or because? They don't name things at all. And here's the real killer. What about unicorns? We all know what the word means, but there's no actual thing in the world for it to label. The theory just doesn't hold up. But the problems don't stop there. Even if we only look at words that do point to real objects, the theory still has a massive, fatal flaw. Here it is. The thing a word points to is not the same as its meaning. Okay, this is the classic example, and you absolutely need to know this for the exam. For a long, long time, people saw a bright light in the sky at dawn and called it the morning star. They saw a bright light at dusk and called it the evening star. Now, we know that both of those are just the planet Venus. So both phrases refer to the exact same object, but do they mean the same thing? No way. Morning star and evening star have totally different meanings. This one example proves that meaning has to be more than just pointing at something. And if you needed one more reason to ditch the naming theory, here it is. That supposed link between the word and the thing it names, it's not even stable. It can and does change over time. Just look at the word meat. Back in Middle English, meat just meant food. Any kind of food. A meat house was a place you stored food, not a steakhouse. But over hundreds of years, the meaning got narrower and narrower, until today, it specifically means animal flesh. The word itself didn't change, but what it names changed completely. So much for a simple, stable label. So if the simple naming theory is a bust, what's the answer? Well, here it is. This is the solution that unlocks the whole puzzle, and it is absolutely central to the field of semantics. I'm talking about the difference between sense and reference. This is the big idea. Meaning has two parts. On one side, you have reference. That's the part the naming theory was obsessed with. It's the link between a word and the thing out there in the real world. Venus is the reference. But then you have sense, and sense is all about the relationships between words inside the language itself. The morning star and the evening star have the same reference, but they have completely different senses. The best way to think about sensei is to think about a dictionary. How does it define a word? It doesn't show you a picture, it uses other words. The meaning of ram, for instance, doesn't just come from pointing at a male sheep. It comes from its relationship to ewe, that's the female counterpart, and to sheep, that's the general category, and from its contrast with cattle or goat. That whole network of connections is its sense. Okay, I know sense can feel a little abstract, like some invisible web inside our heads, but we can actually see it at work. A fantastic way to do this is by looking at something called lexical chains. So what is a lexical chain? It's basically just a thread of related words that weaves its way through a text, holding it all together. Sometimes the link is obvious, like using John, then he, then the boy to talk about the same person. Other times, it's about a shared topic, like a chain of words including water, oceans, and rivers. These chains are the physical evidence of sense making a text hang together. Let's look at a wonderful example from the writer P.G. Wodehouse. I want you to just listen as I read this. Try to notice how certain words and ideas keep popping up, creating a kind of pattern. Okay, did you see them? We can actually trace these threads. There's a clear sunshine chain connecting sunshine and shower bath and the repetition of it fell. There's a castle chain that links the castle to its lawns and terraces. And there's an inhabitant chain that ties all the people together. It's these chains, built on sense, that make the passage feel so rich and coherent. All right, time for our final big concept for the day. So far, we've been focusing mostly on words. But many linguists would argue that the word isn't the most fundamental unit of meaning. The real meaning maker is the sentence. Think about it. We don't communicate by just shouting single words at each other. We speak in sentences, in complete thoughts. The meaning of a single word like book is actually kind of fuzzy until you put it in a sentence. We learn what it is through a sentence like, this is a book. The word gets its meaning from the job it does inside that larger structure. And this idea is powerful. It works for everything from novels to political speeches. Let's look at this excerpt from a 2003 address by George W. Bush. Pay close attention to how those lexical chains we just talked about work across multiple sentences to build a very deliberate, very persuasive argument. You can see three really dominant chains here, can't you? There's the regime chain, just hammering on Iraqi regime. There's the weapons chain, which consistently links that regime to weapons of mass destruction. And then there's the efforts chain, which describes the U.S. side with words like honorable and peaceful. By repeating these chains over and over, sentence after sentence, this speech creates an incredibly strong connection in your mind. Regime equals weapons, which stands in direct contrast to our peaceful efforts. That's the power of cohesion at the sentence level. Okay, we have covered a ton of ground. Let's bring it all home and boil it down to the absolute essentials you need for the exam. This is your cheat sheet. First, and most importantly, the naming theory is too simple. It's wrong. Meaning is not just a label. Second, the crucial concept is sense versus reference. Remember, reference points to the world, sense connects words to other words. Third, lexical chains are how we see sense in action. They're the threads that create cohesion. And finally, don't forget that the sentence, the complete thought, is the primary unit of meaning. So, I'll leave you with this final thought to ponder as you prepare for the exam. If meaning isn't some fixed property that a word just has, but it's actually something we actively build moment by moment using sentences in context, well, what does that really tell us about the challenge and the absolute magic of how we manage to understand each other at all? Something to think about. All right, that's it for today. Happy studying.